The game is rigged, and it's unfair. Welcome to the Jester's Lair. The world's a stage, the people rage, the Joker is on every page. Confusion and chaos gives them satisfaction. Even if you win their game, it's all one big distraction. The game is theirs, it's one big ruse. Even if you win, you lose. Do not even play the game, the power, money, and the fame. Do not be the Jester's fool, do not be his silly tool. That was a fun little poem I made to set the theme for the rest of this video. And today we're going to be talking about the Jester entities that are found throughout many cultures throughout the world. And we're going to talk about the role that they play in these cultures. So growing up, I always assumed that Jester type characters were only found in European countries, like the court jesters that were basically the entertainers of the European kings. However, the Jester entity is found throughout many cultures, whether it's tribal Native Americans or the tribes of Africa, or anywhere else throughout the world. Many cultures have something known as a sacred clown entity or the Jester entities. And I'm going to read about some of these entities to you. The first one we're going to look at is one I've mentioned plenty of times in my video, and it's known as the Pueblo clown entities. So these are sometimes called the sacred clowns, and they are jesters or tricksters in the Kachina religion, practiced by the Pueblo natives of the southwestern United States. It's a generic term, as there are much of these figures in the ritual practice of the Pueblo people. Each has a unique role belonging to separate kivas, basically secret societies or confraternities, and each has a name that differs from one mesa or pueblo to another. The clowns perform monthly rituals, summer for rain, November for the gods, for curing society, black magic. Among the Hopi, there are 4 distinct clown groups, 5 if we include the Natashka. So these are the sacred clowns of the Pueblo natives. And these are basically possessing spirits that they would worship, and they would dress like them and act like them. And the look of these entities, or the way they would try to mimic and dress like them, is always very similar. It's like black and white striped patterns, black and white face paint, interesting looking protrusions coming out of the head. So yeah, the sacred clown entity that the Pueblos worship, the Pueblo clowns, are these trickster entity spirits. Then there's the secret clown entities of the Lakota and Dakota people of the Great Plains of North America. The Heyoka, also spelled Heyoka, is a kind of sacred clown in the culture of the Lakota and Dakota people of the Great Plains of North America. The Heyoka is a contrarian jester who speaks, moves, and reacts in an opposite fashion to the people around them. Only those having visions of the thunder beings of the West, and who are recognized as such by the community, can take on the ceremonial role of the Heyoka. The Lakota medicine man Black Elp describes himself as a Heyoka, saying he had been visited as a child by the thunder beings. The Heyoka is thought of as being backwards, forwards, upside down, or contrary in nature. This manifests by their doing things backwards or unconventionally, riding a horse backwards, wearing clothes inside out, or speaking in a backwards language. So this is very interesting that these entities often do things backwards, including even talk backwards. And what that kind of reminds me of is the show Twin Peaks. I always bring the show Twin Peaks up because I think there's a lot of truth in that show. The show Twin Peaks is basically about possessing spirits who live in another dimension, and they are actually the cause of a lot of the trouble that happens in the little town of Twin Peaks. And I think this applies on a larger scale to the whole world, that a lot of the trouble here on Earth is also possibly caused by possessing spirits in another dimension. And one of the characteristics is them doing things backwards or unconventionally, such as talking backwards. It reminds me of that one character in Twin Peaks known as the Arm. It's this little entity that lives in the Red Room, this interdimensional space. And also in the show, it sounds like he's talking backwards as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
No face, do go.
So the Heyoka symbolizes and portrays many aspects of the sacred beings, known as the thunder spirits. His satire presents important questions by fooling around. They ask difficult questions and say things that others are too afraid to say. Their behavior possesses questions, as do Zen koans. By reading between the lines, the audience is able to think about things not usually thought about, or to look at things in a different way. They provoke laughter in distressing situations of despair, and provoke fear and chaos when people feel complacent and overly secure, to keep them from taking themselves too seriously or believing they are more powerful than they are. So yeah, these are also jester, trickster spirits that this other tribe worships as well. So all throughout the world, you find this jester entity, whether it's in European cultures or in African tribes or in American tribes or in South American tribes, you find these sacred jester entities that they often worship or talk about. And the characteristics of these jesters are the same. They are trickster spirits. They laugh in times of chaos and despair. And their goal in life is to have their fun, laugh at chaos, laugh at our distress, have fun at our expense. So they are basically these possessing spirits. It's very interesting that when people partake in psychedelics, and I mentioned this plenty of times, but for those of you who are new, when many people partake in powerful psychedelics such as ayahuasca or DMT especially, many of them describe going to this other dimension where there are these strange zigzag black and white patterns or checkerboard-like patterns. They also see these bizarre entities that resemble jesters. With these strange protrusions coming out of the head, they're constantly laughing and mocking you and trying to create chaos and disturbances. But it's a common thing to see on psychedelics. And it's super fascinating because almost half a year ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing a guy by the name of Exorad Magical. I became friends with him on TikTok. He is a schizophrenic who's had schizophrenia for, I believe, almost 7 years now, 6 or 7 years. I had the pleasure to sit down and talk with him for almost 2 hours about what it's like being a schizophrenic day to day. Not only does he hear voices, but he sees vivid hallucinations. And I talked to him about the hallucinations that he sees. And we were talking about the theory of chemical imbalances and how that whole idea is based off a theory that was never properly studied, never shown any real tests. And he said, here's the problem with the chemical imbalance theory when it comes to schizophrenia. He said, this chemical imbalance happens to have a unique face. Strange protrusions coming out of the head, looking like a jester. And he looks at you and laughs.
Oh, it's just a chemical imbalance. Here's the problem. The chemical imbalance is it has long ears and a face similar to a human, or at least the symmetry of it. And it sticks its tongue out at you and it goes, ha ha, look at you. And it's so disembodied from you, your ego, even yourself at your most smallest point of consciousness on a psychedelic trip. Doesn't matter. It's so clear to you in that moment. Observer, jester.
I also had the pleasure of interviewing a psychotherapist who's been a licensed psychotherapist for 40 years. He's retired now, but he's actually cured many schizophrenics for life without the use of medication. He believes in the existence of entities. He said many people's mental disturbances are caused by non-physical beings. And he said it was hard for him to accept this, but throughout his experience in the 40 years that he's been a psychotherapist, he said he finally admits that there's something more spiritual going on. And he made a list of 25 patterns that he noticed that these voices go by. The voices and the patterns of these voices are always the same. They're always destructive, negative, saying horrible things. And he created this list of 25 patterns that he sent to my email. And he told me this one story about this patient where the voices basically told the patient, hey, we'll leave you alone forever if you just take your eye out. And of course, when you're a schizophrenic, you're often desperate. You want to get rid of these things and you don't know how. So you'll do anything and everything or try to get rid of it. But basically the voices told this patient, if you take your eye out, we're going to leave you alone forever. So the patient believed the voices, made a bargain with them, believed him, and he actually took his eye out. And the voices left him alone for around 5 to 10 minutes. And then they came back to laugh at him and call him stupid and idiotic for listening to them, creating more emotional trauma so that these entities can feed off him. So what kind of a hallucination tells a person to take your own eye out and will leave you alone? But yeah, these things are trickster spirits. They will trick you. And that's why Jerry Marzinski, he would always tell his patients, never make any bargains with the voices. No matter what they say, no matter what they promise, they will lie to you. They are trickster spirits. They will lie to you. Just like they lied to this patient, in which they told him, take your eye out and we'll leave you alone. And they left for like 5-10 minutes. They were quiet. And all of a sudden they came back to laugh and call the guy an idiot for taking out his eye. They said, look how stupid you are for trusting us. That's crazy. And then in the European cultures, right, you have the court jesters, the entertainers, right? The jester, the court jester, the fool or joker was a member of the household of a nobleman or a monarch employed to entertain guests during medieval and Renaissance eras. Jesters were also performers who entertained common folks at fairs and town markets, and the discipline continues into the modern day, where jesters perform at historical themed events. So as the jester characters in European cultures, they were basically entertainers. They had something known as the jester's privilege, where they can say the most out-of-pocket things, the most truthful things, and they wouldn't get into trouble. Unlike if some common folks said something to the king, such as mocking the king or telling him a truth that he probably doesn't want to hear, the common folk would get in trouble, but the jester had privilege. He can say whatever joke he wants to say, mock, or tell whatever truth, even if the king might not like it. He had the jester's privilege where he wouldn't get into trouble. But now there's a belief that the jesters had a lot more power in the king's courts. In fact, some theorize that the jester had a lot more political power than just being common entertainers. Some say through the power of suggestion, they were basically like the king's advisors. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So this is what the Bible is talking about when it says that there's spiritual wickedness in high places. The high places are these different dimensions where these trickster spirits exist and live in, and they are spiritual parasites. And just like real parasites, to thrive, they need a host. And while we're on the topics of jesters, I wanted to mention something very, very interesting. I want to talk about Otrok Vyacheslav. It's a mystic Slavic boy. Now, when it comes to people claiming to have visions from God or prophecies, I take this type of stuff with a grain of salt because I'm a skeptic, and the reason is because I think the devil did a great job at blurring the lines between real prophecies and visions and divinations, which the Bible says not to do. But the reason I want to mention this little boy is because he had a very interesting vision concerning the last days and concerning the topic of jesters.
Для людей он будет красивый. А Славочка сказала, говорит, мамочка, у него, говорит, такое, говорит, белое лицо, как мукой, говорит, как будто присыпано. И глаза, говорит, такие красные. И так, говорит, на меня, говорит, злобно смотрит. Такой, говорит, страшный. Славочка сказал, что такой будет жуткий гипноз, что люди в округе все будут к нему сами собираться. У них вдруг появится такое желание на него.
But like I said, I take this type of stuff with a grain of salt, people who claim to have visions from God. But the reason I wanted to mention this specific vision is because it aligns with the stuff I've been talking about concerning these jester, trickster spirits. And it's interesting that he had this vision talking about the great deceiver when he returns. So I thought that was very odd. And he talked about how he will have this powerful hypnosis on people. But yeah, guys, that was basically it. I hope you enjoyed this. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. Also, shout out to all my patrons for supporting this channel. All your support means the world to me. It helps me find time to make these videos. So if you would like to support this channel, the link for my patrons in the bio below. You can join for as little as $1 a month, less than a small cup of coffee. But I appreciate all you guys' supports, your thoughts and comments. Please comment your thoughts, no matter what they are. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we are out.